Tony's drama works is true. And it's trying 12 Angry Men.
Yes.
Terrific.
I'd like to see that. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is David Jess, and I am the Assistant Community Library Manager here at the Pompano Beach Library. Welcome to the Pompano Beach Library's Rubel Mystery Lovers Book Club. This book club, yay, is named in honor of the Rubel family, Isabel and Stanley Rubel, who were Pompano Beach residents, library lovers, and avid mystery readers, especially those written by local authors and or involve Florida as the setting. To honor their memory, their family and friends established an endowment fund through the Broward Public Library Foundation to create a mystery collection here at the Pompano Beach Library. Our book club's author visits and our upcoming Whodunit Mystery Nights are our way of introducing this special collection to our customers. For today's book club, we have a special visit from New York Times bestselling author Charles Todd, as well as a visit from our renowned mystery book reviewer, Eileen Cogdill, who will be interviewing her. So let me introduce you to our first guest. Mysteries are my passion, he says, and I consider my reviews a mission of sorts to get the word out about the wonderful books. Mysteries are the social novel of today, not so much about who done it, but why, and what that says about us as a society. Reading mysteries is not just a hobby, it is a passion and a vocation, one for which she is well suited. She reviews mystery fiction for the Sun Sentinel and Fort Lauderdale, Tribune Publishing Wire, Miami Herald, Publishers Weekly, and Shelf Awareness. Her reviews can be found in approximately and conservatively 100 newspapers and major news networks. She has been honored with the Raven Award from the Mystery Writers of America. She continues to be a judge for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in the Mystery Thriller category. She has also had an essay on reviewing in the Anthony, Agatha, and Barry award-winning book, How to Write a Mystery, co-edited by Lee Child and Lori R. King. Wow. These are just a few of her accolades and accomplishments. We are so pleased that she could be here today. Please welcome mystery fiction reviewer, interviewer, sought-after speaker, and a friend to libraries and readers everywhere, Eileen Cogdill.
Thank you, David. And I also want to send my thanks to the Rubel family who is here represented. Thank you so much for your generosity and supporting mysteries. And I also want to thank everyone who's here for being readers. Being readers is so important. And for also supporting libraries. And when you can, for buying books. And we have booksellers in the past who will be selling Charles books after this. So let's get on to it. For more than 26 years, mother and son, Charles and Caroline Todd, wrote more than 30 novels, 2 series, several standalones, at least one standalone, several short stories, 2, and they were all wrapped around World War I. Their Ian Rutledge novels followed Scotland Yard detective Ian Rutledge as he solved crimes around England and also battled his own demons with his PSTD and his struggles with that. During World War I, that was called shell shock, and he didn't admit that. They also have a series about Des Crawford, who is a nurse during and after World War I. And those novels really show the comfort and care that nurses give. These novels, they've been regulars on bestsellers lists. and they have garnered many awards and nominations, and you were recently a guest of honor in Voucher in New Orleans. Now, sadly, Caroline passed away in 2021. She was a lovely lady, just lovely, and she is so missed. And after a few years hiatus, Charles returned to his first solo novel, The Christmas Witness, which is an Ian Rutledge. So let's welcome Charles. Charles, I was so happy to see Ian Rutledge return. He's one of my very favorite characters. And I love the novel. I reviewed it for the Sun Sentinel, I think it was last week. And I've loved this character ever since the series began. And, I think the logical question is, why did it take a few years for you to return to the series?
Well, I'm not going to cast aspersions because you never know when there's going to be an attorney in the audience. It took that long to settle the estate in such a way that I continue on the series. And as a result, there were some legal ramifications where I was unable to sell a book. I kept on writing, but unfortunately, that's the way it was. And then in December, we were able to, my agent and I were able to sign a 4-book contract with Mysterious Press, who did this book in March 10th. Judgment be released, which is a full Ian Rutledge novel, followed by a S. Crawford novel. So we're trying to give equal time.
So 2026, readers have a lot to look forward to.
I hope so.
I don't think you've ever done a Christmas book before. And why? Why did you start with that?
For 2 reasons, really. We had written several novellas and short stories in and around Christmas time, as well as the novels that took place in and around Christmas time. But this was an opportunity that gave me a chance to try to pull a well-known Christmas story with a original Ian Rutledge story and see if I was capable of pulling the 2 together in such a way that it worked. And I'm hoping that everybody will find that it works out well.
I think it did. I think it's very much a tribute to a Christmas Carol as seen through a Scotland Yard detective. And I think it really worked very well. Now, I heard you talk about how you and your mother came up with the character of Ian Rutledge and why you said it was a World War I. But I'm sure many of the people here in the audience would love to hear that.
World War I really changed the England as we know it. They went through the Victorian and Edwardian period all the way up to, Edward died in June of 1910. So it was his son, George V, who was king when Britain entered the war. Andrew Marr did a wonderful documentary on the subject called The Making of Modern Britain that discusses how much the whole country changed. Being a big fan of anything English, my mother went to England for the first time in 1968, and I followed along in 1978. And both the books associated with England and the wonderful history they have over there. We just celebrated the 250th anniversary of the Coast Guard and the Navy and the Army before that. In England, 250 years is considered yesterday's news.
That's fine.
It is very modern because they trace their history back over 1,000 years, and they're always finding Roman ruins from when Julius Caesar originally came to England, and obviously it had a history before then. So it's a fascinating place. As a young man, I was interested in anything that went boom. I read a lot of young adult novels, people like Rob White about World War II, and Rudyard Kipling, and Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, Treasure Island. Those were the foundational books that I read growing up. And eventually you get to a certain point where you start saying to yourself, I understand what happened in this war. Now I want to understand why this war happened and what was the result of that war. Unfortunately, in the United States, because war wasn't declared until April 1st of 1917, with Wilson's war to end all war speech, it didn't have this dramatic an effect on the United States as it did with England. England in between August of 1914 through November of 1918, they basically lost all of the male generation of that time. And it's striking when you go into villages and towns. We were in one village one time that you had the traditional square Norman tower on the front and the sanctuary or nave directly behind it. When you went into the tower itself, etched in the walls were the names of different people who had lost their lives from that church and from that area during World War I. The first thing that attracted me to that was how many had the same last name. The other thing that had an impression on me was I was reading up the walls, and as it started to get dark, the higher up I went, I couldn't read them anymore, but I knew that they kept on going. And this is sort of a microcosm of what was happening in England, where with Kitchener's Palace divisions, where he would bring together palace regiments, he would bring together people from an area or a specific trade or whatever, and they would go to serve together. The problem with that was if the Fusiliers from Northumberland were wiped out, it meant that all the serving age men in that particular town of village were gone. They weren't coming home. And that and the amount of debt that England racked up. I saw a recent comparison that said that World War I cost just England alone over $1 trillion in today's money. And that is just phenomenal to look at. So we decided that that was something that we were going to write about. Then we started developing Ian Rutledge. The Test of Wills was the first in the Rutledge series, and and it was released in 1996, and I believe it was 2014, 15, around there that we began writing the Best Prophet series. We wanted to make sure, first of all, that we were capable of producing the Rutledge series and it wouldn't be diminished or harmed by dividing our attention, so to speak. So, but trying to define, all right, if he's going to serve in Scotland Yard when he returns from the war, he can't be physically injured. So many people lost limbs and were hit by gas and all the different things that happen to soldiers at the front, not to mention the influenza epidemic, which they call the Flanders flu then. So we wanted somebody who was physically able to return to Scotland Yard, but at the same time someone who was deeply affected by the war. It was through discovering who Ian Rutledge was that we came up with the character H.
Did you ever think about not making Ian a soldier with a pen?
Well, in the class structure, and which was very regimented at the time, and because, has anyone seen the Kitchener Wants You with the fingers pointing out? That tremendous effect on the surrounding population. And everybody was told, it'll be over at Christmas. You can go off in August, come back on Christmas, you have a rank, you maybe mentioned in some dispatches or something like that, and it was considered doing the right thing. And you have to remember too that European wars, up until that time, have been very brief, with the exception of the Napoleonic Wars. And they hadn't involved that many people as a percentage of the population, both for England and its colonies. And yet, it turned out that they were completely wrong and misunderstood it. But the one thing, and Colleen mentioned this earlier, the one thing that you could bring back was the shell shock, or what we now call PTSD. Does anybody know why it was called shell shock?
No.
Shells at the time were filled into guns. First of all, they had this self-reloading gun. Everyone, a whole cannon like they did during the Napoleonic Wars. So basically, you could put a shell, breech loaded, which was also new, straight into a gun, put it. You could drop a shell in the same place basically over and over and over and over again. The other thing was these shells were filled with the new Alfred Nobel invention called high explosives or dynamite at the time, but it was a cordite-based explosive. And what happened was when the shell burst, it burst at such a high velocity that it actually broke the sound barrier,
Wow.
which created a shock wave that extended out beyond the range of the actual weapon itself, and that's why they call it shell shock. It was actually during the Battle of Petersburg in the Civil War that they started having trench warfare, which brought on some of this, only then they call it sunstroke.
I think it's very interesting that Ian, like other men of that era, had to keep his PTSD, quiet
Because if he
Absolutely.
admitted that, he was considered a coward.
Absolutely.
And that's fascinating for now.
Britain is well known for its stiff upper lip, shake it off, keep calm, carry on, that type of approach to things. And during and after World War I, when all these people came back with major afflictions, if you watch 1917 or the documentary that was done, They Shall Not Grow Old was the name of the documentary they did on it, which I thought was wonderful. You see these people just like this, and a lot of them were institutionalized, but a lot of them had to keep that stiff upper lip because if you didn't, not only were you considered a coward, but your family that produced such a coward to go off to war. It was also one of the reasons why they started issuing blue uniforms to those who returned from the front during the war on what they call a blighting ticket. That a perfect example was one of them was on a double-decker bus in London. Young ladies would go around and hand white feathers for cowardice to the men who were of serving age but not in uniform. And a young lady came up to this gentleman and handed him the white feather. The only problem was he couldn't stand up to take it from her because he'd lost both legs and was obviously handicapped and unable to graciously stand when approached by a woman. And as a result of those and other experiences, they started issuing blue uniforms so that those who had returned before the war ended due to injuries were not singled out. So
One of the things I love about your books is you take us all over England and you show us little things about the war in England we may not know. For example, I think in A Fatal Lie, you talk about the Bantam Battalion.
mm-hmm.
And this was a battalion made up of men who were very short
Short
by their standards.
by their standards at the time.
And they thought no one would join, and they had legions of people.
Yes, they did.
Talk about some of those little.
The Bantam battalions were generally made up of men, especially from Wales and in the western part of the country that were below the height requirement to be able to serve in the war. And, one of the issues in that particular book was they were able to, because of the composition of the body, they had some difficulties recognizing it, but they saw the little bantam rooster on the tattoo on the arm of the soldier that was in one of the Bantam battalions. And you're right, they not only did they do an excellent job as warriors, but one of the largest explosions, which was actually heard in England, was when they went after, I want to say it was Hill 60. They used these miners because of their knowledge and skill at digging tunnels under the earth. They would tunnel underneath no man's land over to where the enemy's troops were and pack it full of explosives. And then at the right time, they would drop a plunger and set off that explosion. And in that particular case, up until the atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, that was the largest man-made sound that had ever been created.
What was the oddest or strangest fact about England or World War One that you've come across? And maybe it's something you couldn't even use in a book.
Well, in this book, Lord Braxton, who is actually on the rank of colonel and worked with Douglas Hayes as the clerical support staff on for Douglas Hayes' command. They had both gone to Sandhurst together. But the colonel is a veteran of the First and Second Boer War, which was fought in South Africa. To make a very long story very short, they found gold, they found diamonds, and all of a sudden, who got control of the gold and diamonds coming out of South Africa meant more than the result it had on people. And when Kitchener took over command in the Second World War, he basically used barbed wire and slowly cordoned off the entire area and went through, and anything to the north of it, they burned to the ground. Crops, hounds, barns, everything. And the women and children were taken prisoner and put into the very first concentration camp. So the British are the ones who actually created the first concentration camp. It wasn't until a lady from England came out to provide some food and medical aid for those camps that she discovered the condition of the women and children that were literally dying in these camps. It was not like the Nazis had. They didn't have executions there, but they died of famine and disease. And she raised quite a ruckus, which naturally was eaten up by the people on Fleet Street, the newspapers of the time, and they had to be more judicious how they use the system. But it's little things like that that it doesn't wind up in a book, but it makes you say to yourself, when you look at some of the pictures, the photographs that were taken during that time period of these camps, it is horrific to see. But
Now you have a second series about Bess Crawford.
yes.
I like both of your series so much. Bess series starts during World War One, and she's a nurse.
With the sinking of the Britannia.
Right, which is a real event,
Yes, it was. and
and you make it very harrowing. I was on that ship. Why did you come up with Bess? Didn't you have enough to do with the end?
Well, we wrote a standalone novel called A Murder Stone, which was about a woman who all of her cousins and all had gone off and died in World War One. And so when her grandfather passed away, she was the only surviving person to take over the estate. And we really enjoyed writing that novel. We went back and looked at some of our notes, and there were several instances of ideas and thoughts we had about the Rutledge series that just did not work. One, Rutledge worked for Scott least procedural, and there are certain aspects you have to maintain. And second, it is from the male perspective, being a serviceman during the war. And we really enjoyed writing from the female perspective. And so we were sitting in Harold Moreno's office at Mara, and we told her what we were thinking about. And she said, "Oh, that's delightful. How soon can you have a new manuscript for me?" We just were taking the idea, wow, what do you mean? Didn't have one ready, but we went back and worked, and it gave us the opportunity to describe what had happened from a woman's perspective, being a frontline field nurse, and not only working with the nursing staff, but working with the surgeons in the operating theater and all those kinds of things. So it gave us an opportunity to look at it from the point of view of an amateur sleuth who kind of bumps into things because of the way her mind works. She is the daughter of a regimental colonel. She grew up, a lot of her youth was spent in India when her father was stationed there, well educated. And so we found that Queen Alexandria's Imperial Nursing Corps had begun back when Edward VII was on the throne in the beginning of the 20th century. And she wanted to do her bit for the war. Obviously, being female, she was loyal to it. And second of all, she wanted, if she joined an organization, to do it professionally and do it well, because of that's how she was brought up. And yet, at the same time, not somebody who was extremely squeamish. She had been around the Army for a long period of time. She'd grown up with it. Her mother still has her role as the wife of a former commanding colonel. She handles correspondence and all kinds of things that come in. So Bess understands the duties required. And also Bess is a woman of her times. She drives, she's athletic, plays tennis, she's part of that younger generation that was going into that war very optimistically. And so we follow her experiences, and fortunately, one of the things that she does is when a soldier is severely injured, she will escort him back home or back to a regional hospital to get the kind of treatment that he needs, because people like this need constant nursing care during the transportation process and everything. So it gives us a good excuse to have her come home from time to time to follow up with it. And all of a sudden, the name of A Duty to the Dead was the first book that we wrote in the Crawford series. And she makes a promise to a dying soldier. And when she is in England the very next time, she makes an attempt to live up to his request to carry a message to his family. And that ultimately develops into a murder mystery.
Both, one of the things I like about both series is your characters are so intelligent. You know, they're smart and they're compassionate and they are so realistic. How do you keep those series fresh? Because you've written a lot of books.
Yes, this is number 41, actually. Well, that's the fun thing about books because, first of all, each book we look at is a new challenge of, well, for example, in The Gatekeeper, when Rubbish goes and attends his sister's wedding,
Oh, yeah.
and then he goes for a drive to clear his mind. He doesn't have his identification or anything with him. And he comes around a bend in the dark, and there is a car almost sideways in the middle of the road with a woman in an evening gown bent over a gentleman who's lying there, and he's dead. The reason we tried to do that was generally the high constable of a particular county will call in the Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard really has two focuses, the Metropolitan Police, which police London, and the Scotland Yard, which is primarily the investigation division, sort of like our FBI, but the yard has to be invited to assist the chief constable of that particular area before they can just march in and take over, so to speak. So normally, by the time Rutledge shows up to the case, it is a day or two after everything has happened. So we said, this gives us an opportunity to deal with the case where he just comes upon it, it has just happened, it's, immediate, and actually the constabulary's detective inspector is not pleased that here's this guy from London claiming to be an inspector for Scotland Yard and he doesn't have any proof or anything, and for all I know, he can be a suspect. And we took it from there. I think the other thing is, and it took me a while to get used to this. My mother hated to do outlines. Now, I'll be honest. A good friend of ours, Jeffrey Deaver,
Yeah.
he does a 250-page handwritten outline book before he starts to write. Are we going to tell Jeffrey Deaver he's doing it the wrong way? Of course not.
I think you continue.
But for us, what makes our characters, both the protagonists as well as the other characters in the story, come alive to us is because we are getting to know them just as Rutledge is getting to know them, just as the whole question of what happened and the reconstruction process that goes into the solution. And I think the aspect we enjoyed the most, and I still enjoy, is especially we had felt that Scotland Yard inspectors in London had been done well. We did not see any purpose in competing with that. So Rutledge handles cases where the chief constable requests assistance, and he goes all over England,
Yeah, right.
which also allows us to travel all over England. But it allows us to, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, when we use a particular village, we've been there. I'm going back to England in May to do some more research. Generally, every year or two, we would go to England, and I continue to go to England looking for places, or sometimes we'll find something in this place that's real interesting, but this place has the perfect setting, so how do we, uh, dig it up? No Shred of Evidence was a perfect example. That house we actually saw somewhere else. It's not in Cornwall, but we just kind of dug it up and moved it. The only problem is when you're traveling to England like that, you don't walk in the door and say, "Hi, we want to set a murder in your town." We quietly, unobtrusively spend some time in the area that we're going to write about. We get to know a lot of people. Biggest clue. People in England do not like to talk about themselves, but they'll go on forever about their dog. They love their dogs. They walk their dogs everywhere. It's a great way to meet people. But we always change the name of the town. In some cases, you can work it out geographically and sort of pinpoint the area. But even in this book, I had a town that we had visited, but I rearranged one or two things to change the name of the town. And the Lord Braxton and his wife and the estate and all that are not actually there. You might go down the road in England and go, that road name sounds familiar, but when you get to know people in an area, and a lot of times we have lasting friendships with people in that area, the last thing we want to do is turn around and set a murder mystery in their town. But my mother and I used to split up when we went to town.
I heard you mention that. I thought that was very smart.
We were in one little village one time. She went one way and I went another, and we would get together for dinner and exchange notes. My mother loved and had quite a few cats when she was alive, and which are alive and well and with my aunt. So there's a happy ending to that story. But both of us had gone to the little village church, but she was the one who found a small gravestone with a stone sculpture of a cat. And that's where the church cat was laid to rest. It always hung around the church. The vicar and various people who looked after the church would always feed it and care for it, all that good kind of stuff. And when the time came that the cat passed away, they buried her right beside the church where she had always been. Little tiny piece of nothingness, but it's great to put into a book. And it's based on something that actually occurred. So you try to give the flavor of the land and The only scary thing is when you're doing 100,000 word manuscript, and you get to about 80,000 words, and you still don't know who did it. You know,
I've heard many authors say that.
it's a little complicated. But my mother always used to say, I was fascinating. She said, well, if I know how it's going to end, why should I write it in the first place? And that made a lot of sense to me. But they're not cardboard cutouts that we, pull the strings kind of thing. Rutledge and Bess are as alive to me and or to my mother as any other person, which is why she passed. I didn't want to let him go.
We're glad you did.
Now, I have more questions. I imagine the audience here would have questions. So, anyone have a question for Charles? Doug?
I read your books in order. That's how I think all because I think there are sequential patterns in personality. So I forget which one was personality that started. And I noticed in all these books that you have kind of a Daniel Silva approach to surprise, shocking. Whereas in Daniel Silva's books, you can turn a page and the whole world falls apart. Yours is more scary. Because it's subtle, it's slow, and all of a sudden, oh my God, that's what's been happening. I love it. How do you craft the words to drag us along, unknown and innocent, and all of a sudden it just builds to a crescendo in a couple of paragraphs? You do that.
It's a great compliment.
And thank you very much. Because it's a surprise to me, Rubel will come around the corner and all of a sudden he will see something that is out of the ordinary. And it may be one of two things. It may be that it's just, he comes around the corner and sees somebody coming out of a maintenance shed, wiping his greasy hands on a rack that watched drive out of the area behind the inn where he's staying. But that character plays an important role later on in the book. Or he'll be driving along somewhere, come around a corner, find a dead body in the middle of the road, come around a corner and somebody's standing in the middle of the road. They are things where, for some reason, we just, and it's almost a spur of the moment where you have something like that happen. Because it just, you're riding along and it works right there, right then. And then you go, oh, now what do I do? And I go back to, that's the reason why we don't like to outline. Because I've taken time, I've attended a lot of panels, and heard a lot of people talk about subplots and twists and turns and, action here and action there. It is just as big a surprise as you're writing as it is to the reader. The only good thing is to know that it actually has that impact. And no insult to me. Reviews are fantastic. They help you a great deal. But going around and talking to and getting to know people who read the work their feedback is so valuable because ultimately that's what it's all about. It goes back, I faith in part to my grandfather, my mother's father. She grew up in North Carolina, and my grandfather used to sit out on the back porch, screen-in back porch, and he would tell stories. I loved his stories. I can tell them now, and they wouldn't mean anything to anybody, because it was the way he told those stories. And there were times when I would mention one of them to him just to get him started, because I wanted to hear the story again, because it was one of my favorites. And really and truly, that's what we're here for. As writers, we're here to provide some entertainment, an opportunity to perhaps learn some things, to read about some things that may make you reconsider some of your own personal choices and likes and dislikes, those kinds of things. But ultimately, it is there for the reader to enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, then I've missed the mark, and I wouldn't blame my publisher for telling me to take a hike.
That's a great ending, but we've got 5 more minutes. And I know there's going to be another question. Peter, I'll get back to you.
Really quick, and you almost touched on this. I've often wondered in reading the books, you do such a great job of creating these imageries in our mind, like how things work. We're going back 100 years, and you paint a very good picture of that. So I've often wondered if it's just you or you and your mother who did all the research to capture these little nuances of how the table looked, reading the butter, countryside. I've often wondered, do you have others who assist you? You like get the sense, go figure this out, some little details we need. And as another quick side, you ever thought of maybe having Crawford and Rutledge just pass each other on the side?
Well, including Melinda, who kind of
Yes, Melinda. Yes, that's the only connection.
there was one where he asked Melinda to ask a question, and was it racing the devil?
I think so.
Realize that.
Where there had been that kind of interaction. But the main thing we try to stay away from is we did not create fast to marry Rubel.
Oh, no, yeah.
So the other problem that we have is because we want to start this story from the beginning, manuscript I just turned in for best is the 14th in the best series. So we started that series about 10 years ago. So you're looking at a situation where her timeline and Rutledge's timeline don't match. And it's very difficult because if they were to actually meet in some fashion, you would necessarily have to figure out, all right, if she beats Rutledge in book 27 of the Rutledge series, which is book 16 in the Best Crawford series, so that they don't, have an issue. But it's possible.
If I never thought of friendship, I just thought of a passing, like, oh, there's one of those nurses. And that would be it. The reader knows who we're talking.
For research,
Yeah.
We used to buy 2 of everything. Anytime I saw a book that was interesting and had to do with the war or Britain or something like that, I would always get 2 copies. My mother would do the same. I have most of her research materials and my research materials. There were duplicates I donated to the library. I live in Palm Beach Gardens, so I donated to the North Palm Beach Library. But now I think I've got roughly 15,000 books.
Oh,
Yeah, I do a lot of my own research. For when I'm starting to research something or I have a specific question, I will go online and see what is there. But a lot of times I look down to for example, if you use Wikipedia, it will say see also or references, and they'll mention a specific book, and then I will get that book, get it in. 2 interesting things. I just recently purchased a hardware catalog from 1909. So that it's a British hardware catalog that lists what the names were for things and what they used. For example, in 1921, Rutledge can't just whip out a measuring tape and go zoom. They didn't, though things like that didn't really, they did exist, but they weren't in common use at the time. It was more an intricate folding type thing made out of boxwood that they used to measure things. Somebody put something in a wheelbarrow, but it was long, so you need a long wheelbarrow. What was that wheelbarrow called? The other thing I just got was a 1920 Bartholomew's Road Atlas of England, so that I don't send down the A24 and have to get on the M3. It lets me know what roads, if Rutledge is traveling from Birmingham to Chester, what road would he have taken? What are some things he would have seen on the way? Because when we were there and we drove it, we were on a modern road and not on that particular route that Rutledge would have taken. And the problem is it's too much fun. You wind up going down the road. There's a question.
Well, I think we're actually almost out of time.
Oh.
We have time for one quick question. Otherwise, the books are for sale in the back, and you can ask Charles your question while you buy your book, and he signs it for you. So I hope you all have enjoyed this. Charles, thank you so much. Nadine, you wish to say something?
I want to thank everyone for attending our Rubel, I can't even remember what it's called, Mystery Book Lovers Book Club. Wow. So under the book club, as Dave said, we have our author visits. We will have a whodunit game night. That's going to be interesting. And of course, we have a regular book club. So our author visits are absolutely fantastic. Where else are you going to be able to meet Charles Todd? Except in the supermarket. But
Coming up in February.
in February, we have James Rapando coming up. We also have Mark Greeny. In November, we have Tracy Hall. She has 3 different series. There's a Scottish Shire murder mystery. We've got the Irish Castle Murders and the Salem B&B murder mysteries. So she has 3 different series. And we also have Neil Neil forgives me. But Neil will also be here. He will be here on December 6th, the first Saturday in December. And he has a Santa and the Sleigh Dogs. So he has a bunch of different mysteries. He is an incredibly prolific writer. And I'm not one for animals solving mysteries, but I'm going to have to read this one because it sounds like a lot of fun. So guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you had an awesome time. Please stay. We've got refreshments. We've got cookies. I didn't bake them, so you're safe. And I do have my Jamaican sorrel drink, so please do not leave until you try it. It's non-alcoholic, although you can add some because we do also have it with rum, but not for a library because we don't serve alcohol in the library. But anyway, please, I hope you go to the table, buy your book, Charles will sign, and we'll have a great time and get to know each other because you're all mystery book lovers and you love your authors. Yeah. That's it. Thank you all.